at any given time, a person's only going to be able to maintain like financially a few subscriptions. And so unless you're like the top one or two brands in a person's life, you're going to have a really hard time around retention.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of What's Working in E-commerce. I'm your host, Eagan Heath from Caravan Digital. We're a direct-to-consumer e-commerce agency. We help with paid search, paid social, and email automation. Today, I'm speaking with a pro in the Shopify app ecosystem. We have CEO and co-founder Ben Fisher, formerly of Carthook and now at Rodeo. Ben, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Right on. Tell us a bit about subscriptions. How did you get into this, and why is subscription, such an important piece of e-commerce these days?
Sure. It's funny. So like the reason I got into it, I can take it back, is like I've been building B2B SaaS companies for the last 15 or so years. My background's as an engineer and designer. And I've focused predominantly on e-commerce because I love building tools. Right. And e-commerce is one of those places where you have a lot of, call it like non-technical people who are really creative marketers and have like ambitious ideas. And so it's sort of just like a really comfortable place for me to play, because I basically can go to people and like be like, what are your biggest problems? And then I can go back to the mad scientist lab with our team and come up with solutions. And so, as you mentioned previously, I've been with Carthook. So I've been working with a lot of direct-to-consumer brands over the last 9 years or so around ways to improve AOV and LTV. And one of the things, even in my own life, was I was subscribing to a lot of stuff. And as a consumer, I frankly, like, I love, and I guess this is the engineering side of me, is I love the idea of set it and forget it. I love the idea of automation. The reality of a lot of subscription experiences, though, was like anything but. It's kind of like after you've bought like after you've had like one or two renewals, oftentimes what happens is that you still have product left over and you're not ready for more. Like I literally a couple months ago, I got a shipment of paper towels. It was like 10 paper towels, and I still had paper towels in my cupboard. I just missed the upcoming order reminder. So I am not joking. I have a freezer full of paper towels because I had no other shelf space. And that is that is just like a good example of what people experience throughout the world. And so my original solution to this was I created calendar reminders that would remind me to buy the product again. And I could like move the reminder if I wasn't ready for more. And so a lot of what we built with Rodeo, the founding piece of it was building a consumer-centric solution to subscription, where the goal isn't necessarily, we'll call it like this stupid robotic subscription experience. And instead it's about flexibility and enabling the brand to offer the product when the consumer actually needs it. It's like, that's the thing too, is like what brands want is they want loyalty, they want like repeat purchases, but a person's not buying for the 6th time because, generally speaking, it's not good if it's just simply because they forgot about it, because then you have product issues. And so it's really about how can you as a brand provide a great experience and eliminate the friction around the repeat buying experience. And so that's what we've built with Rodeo, where I joke sometimes we're like a therapist between a brand and their customer. Like, how do we find that win-win? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good. It seems like early on in direct to consumer, I'm thinking of Dollar Shave Club and maybe other ones like that, where they really figured out that sort of recurring model, and then everybody wanted a piece of that. And now it's almost like we're on the other side of it of, Mint.com and others we talked about are rolling out tools to make it easier to unsubscribe or to unenroll from these. So kind of finding that happy medium. Is that right? What do you see as some of the challenges, or what are pieces that, direct to consumer brands are getting wrong in terms of subscriptions?
Yeah, so I think there's a few macro trends. One of them you mentioned, which is just saturation. It seems like every single brand is asking you to essentially get married. And so what you have are a bunch of people or a bunch of brands asking a customer to make a commitment, when in fact most families can afford maybe 3 products, especially because average order value of a CPG product is around like $30-$40. It's not like they're buying a $5 subscription. And so at any given time, a person's only going to be able to maintain like financially a few subscriptions. And so unless you're like the top one or two brands in a person's life, you're going to have a really hard time around retention. And so, that just as we'll call it a headwind, is part of what's happening in subscriptions, is that a lot of people are asking for that commitment. The second piece too is specific to CPG, where unless it's a medication or a very specific supplement that someone takes every single day, the amount of product that someone gets, like, let's forget the fact that everyone offers a 30, 60, 90-day supply. Like, who knows how oftentimes the actual amount of product in that package matches that
need, right? Yeah.
Right. Like, so there's like this disconnect between how quickly someone consumes product and what the subscription intervals are. And it's only, especially now that we're out of COVID, it's only become, I hate to say it's become more complicated because people travel again. Like, you go out, you're having dinner with friends and family. So you're not necessarily consuming things at a consistent rate. Not that you were necessarily before either, but it's even more, say, uncertain or unreliable now. And so you combine those two things where it's like, everyone's had that experience now of they get they basically are charged for something that they don't need. And so that's a negative experience with the brand. You now have too much product, and the first thing someone does is they cancel. And then you combine that with the fact that more and more brands are asking you to commit. It's kind of like, it's not your brand's fault, but people are just everyone's having these bad experiences. And I think what you were mentioning before around like Rocket, I think Rocket Money is one of them, and another, Mint just rolled it out, where those services that are specifically just even focused on canceling a subscription they exist because people are having bad experiences, and it's top of mind. So, the important thing for brands is, I'm not saying don't do subscriptions. And again, I think subscriptions are a really powerful mechanism, but they need to be done well, and they need to be done in a way where, and also just recognize that a subscription is not the right solution to get most of your customers buying again. Like, a subscription in any brand, you'll maybe see like 15% of their customers subscribe. Certain products have a much higher percentage than that, but ultimately, the customer doesn't care about the subscription. What they care about is having your product when they need it.
Yeah, that's well put. We have a client we're working with right now in the supplement space, and something we wonder is, obviously the client would like more and more people to subscribe to the product out of the gates. It's one of those things to really try for 30 to 90 days. Is that something you guys work with Rodeo? Maybe the first purchase is going to be, one off, but then how do we then move those people into subscribers? Is that something you guys work with?
Yeah, no, that's a big piece of it, is even providing mechanisms up front where you can say, so we have this concept called on demand, which it's kind of like, if you think about if you think of the two ways that people buy, it's kind of absurd. It's kind of like a race car with two speeds. They're either going really, really slowly, and you're buying whenever you think of it. So basically, like, they're parked, or they're going full blast, 125 miles an hour, which is like this subscription that automatically renews at whatever pace you chose. And there's no sort of in-between mode. And so that in-between mode is what we call on demand, where the idea is someone provides their credit card, it's on file, and instead of it automatically charging them after 30 days, they'll get a message through SMS and or email, let's say at 25 days in, saying, are you ready for more? Right? Like, you could even be like, oh, go, take a look at your cabinet, see if you need more. And the thing is, and this is the key part of it, is especially for consumers or customers who don't necessarily know they want a subscription, it's a great way to still get someone to opt into that, like, Pavlovian reminder of you're top of mind to them. And because your card's on file, the last step of like the repeat purchase is frictionless, because the person's not going to have to go through your store and check out and like blah, 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 because you're still using a subscription mechanism. 99% of it's really focusing on, is this the right moment that the customer, need my product? And if once they've said yes, then the rest of it's sort of gravy, and it doesn't require any effort on their piece.
Gotcha. And is that sent by, the email tool like Klaviyo, or is that handled right through the subscription tool like Rodeo?
So we integrate with your ESP. So in this case, it's Klaviyo, and send it through SMS as well as through email.
Got it. So that's kind of a nice in between of, hey, are you ready for more? Instead of, by the way, more is on the way. And that sort of feeling of, whoa, I'm not ready for more, right?
And again, it depends on, like, you have different segments of customers. For some people, and we do support like the automated subscription that renews, and you still get a reminder saying, hey, you're about to be charged in 3 days. Do you want to make any modifications or add more products? It's just a lot of people are busy. They miss those emails. They miss those text messages. So it's not as much. It's not just that, yes, you're reminding people before a charge goes through. It's just there's a lot of situations where people are busy. They're forgetting to actually take action. And so this is another tool that you have as a brand where you're basically, you're stepping in and saying, are you ready? And the consequence of that is a lot more people who would be hesitant to subscribe are opting into that, because they are still in charge. The things that they liked about buying on their own still exist where they're in control, but they're only getting the benefits, which are, well, I don't have to think about it. The brand is going to check in with me and ask if I'm ready.
Yeah. And it sounds like those are coming out through SMS as well. I assume,
yes,
are you guys
both,
integrating then with the text message tool?
Yeah. So you can do SMS and email both through Klaviyo.
Yeah, that's great. One thing I'm curious is, what are the important metrics to watch when someone's instituting a subscription program or trying to optimize theirs? What are the numbers they should really be looking at?
So, I mean, there's really two, well, I'll just say simply, like there's two stages that if I'm talking to a brand, I really want to take a look at. First of which is the first renewal percentage, right? So by cohort, how many people buy once and then renew their subscription? That will often reveal product issues, or it will reveal like other things that are going on. Like, are you perhaps too heavily discounting your product so that you're attracting a lot of people who will buy, but they'll immediately cancel? And then the second metric there is how many people who've renewed continue to renew, right? So it's essentially like a two-stage cohort, where you're looking at cohorts in those two different stages. So in terms of metrics, those are two that I look at. Beyond that, I'd say like this is less about metrics, but more about even understanding what are the what are the reasons that people are subscribing in the first place. And part of this goes back to just even how do you frame your subscription program? Is it just around a discount? Are you emphasizing and have you incorporated like other perks, whether it's early access to new product? Like we've worked with one brand where they offered products that only subscribers could buy. So you couldn't buy it if you were not a subscriber. And a lot of what even what I preach and what we preach is it's not about the subscription so much, but it's really about a membership experience. Subscriptions are we'll call it a revenue mechanism. That's not the thing. And so it's really about looking at how are you bundling in additional benefits.
Yeah, that's great. I was going to ask kind of what are the incentives you've seen? It sounds like it's, a discount is nice, but people might just be signing up for the discount. How else do we provide more value, make it part of really a continuity kind of service or program? And that could be first access, first crack, or they get, access to things other people don't. That's excellent.
Yeah. And one thing I'll actually add there, because I could go off on a while around all the problems around discounting and prices is, it's because part of the issue there too is what message are you sending by discounting the product, right? Are you saying that the product's not worth the full price? Because that also can have that I know from speaking to consumers, like a lot of even my own work actually is talking to consumers and their relationships with subscription programs, and the amount of paralysis or analysis paralysis of people where they want to buy the one time, but they don't want to pay full price because the subscription's available for 20% off. They actually, I have had several conversations even in the last month of people not buying at all because they don't want to pay they don't want a subscription, but they feel like they're wasting their money paying full price. And so the better strategy is, instead of offering a discount, incorporate whether it's like a free gift or additional product. So for example, like, include a little bit of extra product with the subscription, or maybe just offer some of a discount on the first purchase. But again, you need to be really careful around not discounting. I'd say in general, I would say if you're discounting more than 20%, like that's a huge red flag. If you look at Amazon Subscribe and Save, you get 5% off, right? Like, it's not like Amazon is making their subscription so attractive, and that's for a good reason. And ignoring the fact that discounts are a great way to like push impulse purchases, it also is dangerous because it affects your contribution margin. And so you're offering essentially like a healthy or a steep discount to people who you're attracting simply because you've made the subscription offer so attractive. And that's not a healthy place for your business, because you're just giving a discount to people who don't actually want to subscribe. And it'll affect everything you learn, even around like, what is it that is drawing people into your subscription program. So it's really important not to just fall back on that.
Yeah, thank you for talking about that. It's a great way to think about, how do we attract people into a continuity program? How do we make it worth it? And how do we sell it, not just on price, not just losing margin? So I appreciate that. Sounds like the other big number then is churn. How do we keep people in the subscription program? You've talked a bit about that, but how do you guys do that? And I think you referenced a case study as well around that.
Yeah. So before we spoke, you had asked just some anecdotal stories of from brands we've worked with. And what I mentioned was one brand, one of the first comments, actually it came up in a check-in with them. They've been on our platform for a while. At least I want to say this, they've probably been on it for almost a year. And they said that their churn dropped by 50%. And I attribute a lot of that. We like, from all the data, it is around the flexibility around the replenishment period. And so, a lot of the overwhelming feedback that we get, both from brands as well as especially like people who run like the CX teams who use our product, it's like the number of tickets that they're able to eliminate just of consumer like usability issues just by using the product is like extremely important, because it enables them to focus on other parts of the experience and actually dealing with support tickets that need to be addressed by a human, as opposed to just like, we'll call it like basic usability issues. And so that again goes back to the fact that like people want to be able to kind of get in and get out and manage their subscription and not have to, mess around with passwords. We use passwordless authentication. So when someone's getting an upcoming order reminder or any of these interactions, they can click a link and they're securely logged in. And from there, they're able to quickly find what they're trying to do. Because again, you don't want to be in this place where you're relying on hoping people forget that they have a subscription in order to buy, because that's also a really dangerous signal for you, because it's distorting your confidence in your product, when in fact, because if you're raising money or investing an enormous amount of money in customer acquisition, it's really important for you to have like, we'll call it like a real sense of how your product is, right? Because that health is something that is important for you to address when it's an issue, not find out later, 10 months later or years later, that in fact you've had a leaky bucket and you just kind of were artificially, doing well.
What a great point. Rely on the quality of the product and the value you're providing, not on people forgetting that they had a subscription.
Yeah. And because again, going back, it's like the value of a subscription is typically it's convenience and or other perks that are incorporated in it, like whether it's curation, where you're, the subscription, what's great about it is you're getting surprised every month about what you're purchasing, or these other sort of ancillary benefits like early access to products. But again, someone's not buying for a sixth time because it got $5 off. They're buying because it's convenient and it fits into their life. And so it's always important to like kind of fall back to that and remember and keep in mind, like, that is the reason people subscribe.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. One thing I just want to be clear on, is it opt in or opt out? If I get that email, hey, or email or text, it's been 30 days, are you ready for another? Do I have to say no to stop the shipment, or do I have to say yes to place a shipment?
I'm glad you asked, because it's an important distinction. So a traditional subscription is opt out. So if you don't reply to that reminder, it will automatically fulfill the order for you. Like that is subscriptions as they currently exist. It's how every subscription product works. We do support that, but on demand, which I described as unique to us, which is what we created to create the flexible in between mode, that is opt in. So the traditional experience is opt out, but then we have this opt in experience that is for a certain segment of your customers where if you don't reply, it doesn't automatically charge them. What it does is it continues to like check in with nudges to see, are you ready yet? And typically what happens is if someone's not ready, they, we'll call it the follow-up reminder. We'll check in with them and remind them. But what's better is that it enables them to be in full control of when it's purchased. And again, that's right for like a certain segment of your customers.
Yeah, that's excellent. Ben, you've had a successful exit in a business, so I know a SaaS tool, that's different than a product, but I would be remiss not to ask you about that. We're big fans of lean startup and customer development methodology and all those things. Just curious if you could reflect on some of your success and, selling CartHook, developing and everything like that, and now you're on to the next one. What works when you're developing a product and developing a market?
Paying attention to the market's probably the biggest thing, right? So CartHook was not the product that was not the business that we sold. The original product of CartHook was a tool that helped recover abandoned shopping carts. So it was still early in these abandoned cart emails going out. And so at the time, my business partner, he had built and sold an e-commerce brand. And I had been building B2B SaaS companies and was basically looking for my next B2B SaaS business within e-commerce. And so Jordan and I met. He was a non-technical person looking for a technical partner, and I was a technical person looking for a non-technical partner who was really good at sales and marketing and also had a lot of experience in e-commerce. And so at the time, shopping like abandoned cart emails were like a new thing, and so that was the original version of that was the original product. And then we were super early in the Shopify was like one of our integrations, and so we were early in the Shopify ecosystem. This is way before the IPO, and what we observed was that there was a lot of pain and demand by merchants around just the ability to control I'll call it like the checkout flow. At the time, Shopify was a 3-page checkout where you couldn't change anything, really. You couldn't customize it. And what was also happening at this time was a lot of marketers were coming from selling info products using ClickFunnels, and they were coming into drop shipping and selling on Shopify. And all of the tools that they had at their disposal on ClickFunnels were not available for them on Shopify. And so there was this disconnect between like these marketers wanted to be able to sell the way that they knew how to, which was they would increase AOV through post-purchase upsells. And the fact that it was post-purchase was really important because you wanted to get out of the way of the conversion, right? And so we made this bet it was like 8 months into CartHook. We did a pivot from having the abandoned cart product to what we saw was a massively larger opportunity around post-purchase upsells and the ability to create sales funnels. And so, yeah, in terms of like the takeaway there was really about being, not getting too hung up on your current product. What's funny is if you look at lean startup, a lot of that certainly like around like MVPs and a lot of what Steve Blank talks about is, rather than changing your product, you change your customer, right? Take your product your early product you built, as you're selling it, don't keep trying to change your product necessarily, but try to find a segment of the market that wants what you've built. But in CartHook's case, we saw this other opportunity and we decided to change our product. And there was also an enormous amount of we'll call it like evidence and speaking to marketers, and it made sense why people would want it. And we ran both those products for a little bit and then eventually sunset the cart abandonment tool.
Yeah. Thank you for telling that story. I'm curious a bit about maybe the blocking and tackling of How do you listen to the market? Was that interviews?
Yeah.
Was that one-to-one conversations? Was that chat? How do you get that information to know we need to pivot to a totally different
Yeah.
product?
Well, and I mean, our growth for the cart abandonment product was still healthy. Just it wasn't. It was getting harder. I think there were still competitors around our time who have built really massive businesses just around the cart abandonment tool, although it certainly has become a commodity, right? Like even, and so the other piece too, sorry, you're talking about this is reminding me some of the stuff of like why we even made that pivot. One piece that was difficult around the cart abandonment business was our revenue model in part was based off of being able, basically saying we get a percentage of the carts that we help recover, right? Like we get a percentage of that revenue. And so we'd actually have like brands calling us saying, arguing over individual purchases that they had recovered by phone, right? Because attribution to email and like whether it was an open or a click, it's imperfect. And so what we also want to do is we wanted to find a business model where we were closer to the point of transaction so that it was less of a like, do you get credit for this or not? And so again, like post-purchase upsells were like a much healthier business for us. And that's part of what drew me and drew us to Rodeo and helping around subscriptions and repeat purchases is we really want to be around that place where we provide the most amount of value and we provide value that directly impacts revenue.
You're helping your users increase their sales,
Make
increase
more
their
money.
profits.
Yeah, exactly. But to answer your question directly around like how are we paying attention to the market? A lot of it was, and this part of this is unique to e-commerce, but there's a lot of really active Facebook groups. A lot of like Facebook groups. I mean, I'm trying to think about there's e-commerce related forums all over the internet. Like I think e-commerce fuel is one of them specifically for merchants. And so one of the unique things about e-commerce merchants, I mean, they're entrepreneurs, but they tend to do a lot of like sharing tips and tricks and sharing like what tools are working for them and like what's their stack. And so there was sort of a native word of mouth virality into it, but also people were complaining a lot around the things that were driving them crazy. And so you could go in there and you could talk to people and also just like observe what are the like trends around what people are complaining about. And even if you went to Shopify's own message boards, you would see what were like the customer complaints. And so, or Twitter. So there's a lot of different places. We obviously also spoke to customers, but there was an enormous amount of just like feedback that we were getting from the market just by interacting and observing in like these communities.
Yeah. Wow. Great stories. Thank you so much, Ben. That's really valuable. If you've got time, I have to ask you, in a service-based business, I always want to look at you guys and say, when you've built up products, you've sold them now, you've sold a product-based business. Is what we're doing over on the service side, like, are we fools over here, or how do you think about it?
Depends on your margins, right? I mean, software has a lot of its own problems. One of the biggest ones is revenue is slow early on, and then it compounds. Again, like so, I know firsthand the value of recurring revenue, and on the B2B SaaS side, and so I 100% get the reason why it's so attractive to e-commerce brands. The difference is like fundamentally like subscriptions to physical products are different than subscriptions to digital products. You might not use a product every single month in a digital product, but in B2B, hopefully you are. But you also aren't accumulating a physical copy of it when you don't use it, which is like a really sort of stark reminder that you didn't use it. And so I'm jealous early on, I think, of a lot of my friends who've built service businesses, because I will say so I left CartHook actually a few years before we sold it. I wasn't involved in the day-to-day anymore. And what I did is I consulted as a fractional CTO to subscription e-commerce brands. And I really treated that as customer development. So I worked within the brand side from the technical leadership end and worked with a number of brands around New York City. And, that as a consultant like that, it was great cash. But, as anyone who's built probably up a service business, like it can become difficult to scale it. You're oftentimes trading time for money. And so once you've had experience and I guess some success with the software side, it's nice once you have gotten scale, but it can be brutal for that initial up ramp. So I'd say both sides. It depends on your personality. It also depends on lifestyle and stuff like that. Like if you can eat ramen for a while, then software can be fine.
Yeah, thank you for talking about that. I was listening to Naval Ravikant talk about the forms of leverage there's people leverage, there's financial leverage, there's even technical leverage now, and then media leverage. And people will sort of ask as a proxy, how big is your company? How many people do you have? And that's almost an outmoded way to ask about how much leverage you have. So 100%. I like to ask that, but I've also heard from people who have done both, did services, did agency, then went into SaaS, that ramp up period does take a while. And so you need something to bridge the gap. So thank you so much, Ben Fisher. So many insights here, so much experience to learn from, and what a great product as well, and what a great space. Where can people find you, and who's a good fit to reach out to you?
Sure. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and Twitter. My username on both platforms is skinny and bald, because I'm kind of skinny, kind of bald. More bald than skinny these days. Or you can search for my name, Ben Fisher, on LinkedIn, but I'm under skinny and bald for both of those. You can also go to our website, hey.rodeo, and get in touch, request a demo. And that's Hey, Hey, Rodeo, RODEO. I'm sure you'll have in the show notes. But yeah, so we predominantly work with brands that are doing 8 figures, but work with a lot of brands who are not quite at 8 figures yet, but they have healthy growth, and what they're really looking for is how to provide a more flexible consumer subscription experience to help with retention and boost LTV. So if you're a brand like that, we work with a lot of CPG brands, so food and beverage, health and wellness. Happy to talk, even if it's just to point you in the right direction, and to see whatever we can do. As I said, been around the Shopify ecosystem for a long time now, and so I'm always happy to share whatever I can based off of past experiences.
Great. And you guys have a podcast as well, Subscription Radio.
Yes, we do. Yeah, Subscription Radio.
Right.
Yep.
All right. Check it out. Well, Ben Fisher, thank you so much for coming on and sharing what's working in e-commerce and also what's working in entrepreneurship.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.